Right now, you can check the weather before deciding whether to leave the house. You look at a tiny glowing screen, see a rain cloud, and suddenly the picnic is canceled. But that habit, looking for a sign that tells you what the sky will do next, is one of the oldest survival tricks humans have. It is older than writing, older than the pyramids, and older than Stonehenge. Because more than 6,000 years ago, people with no clocks, no forecasts, and no permanent cities arranged stones beside a seasonal lake deep in what is now the Sahara. The question is, why did ancient humans build a stone circle there? To answer that, forget the Sahara, Today, Nabta Playa, in southern Egypt, is brutally empty. It lies roughly 100 kilometers west of Abu Simbel, surrounded by sand, rock, and the kind of silence that makes your car engine suddenly feel medically important. But around 10,000 years ago, Earth's climate shifted. Summer monsoon rains pushed farther north into Africa. Water collected in low desert basins. Grass appeared. Gazelles, hares, birds, and other animals moved through a landscape that looked less like endless desert and more like a dry savanna with temporary lakes. The Sahara had a green phase, not rainforest green. You were not swinging through vines while giraffes served drinks. Rain was limited, seasonal, and unreliable. Some years were generous. Others delivered almost nothing. That uncertainty is the key to everything. The first groups reached Nabta Playa more than 10,000 years ago. Archaeologists found small camps, stone blades, grinding tools, animal bones, and pieces of surprisingly well-made, decorated pottery. These people did not live there forever. They arrived when seasonal water made the basin usable, then left before it disappeared. Imagine the calculation. Arrive too early, and there may be no water. Arrive too late, and the grass may already be gone. Bring your family and animals at the wrong time, and a bad scheduling decision becomes a funeral. There was no calendar on the wall, no month called June, no helpful person saying the rainy season starts next Tuesday. You had the sky. Over generations, people noticed patterns. The sun did not rise in exactly the same place every morning. It slowly moved along the horizon, reached an extreme point, then reversed. Certain stars appeared at particular times of year. Plants changed. Animals moved. Wind shifted. The sky repeated itself. Rain did not always cooperate, because weather has apparently enjoyed ignoring human plans since the beginning. But the sky offered the most reliable clock available. Then life at Nabta became more ambitious. By roughly 7,000 years before the Common Era, some communities were building larger settlements with oval huts, storage pits, and deep wells. One site produced more than 20,000 seeds from wild grasses, legumes, tubers, and fruits. These were people learning how to squeeze stability from a landscape that refused to provide it. Digging a deep well is not a casual afternoon project. It requires planning, shared labor, and enough trust that half the group does not wander off while you are several meters underground reconsidering your friendships. The wells changed the rules. People could remain after surface water began disappearing. They could support larger gatherings, and they could bring the animals that would eventually dominate Nabta's story. Cattle. To these herders, cattle were not just walking stakes. They provided milk, possibly blood, movement, wealth, status, and security. Killing one casually would be like smashing your bank account with a rock because lunch felt inconvenient. So when archaeologists found cattle deliberately buried beneath stone mounds, they knew this was not ordinary food waste. Around 5,500 years before the Common Era, after a severe dry period, a new phase began at Nabta. People returned with a stronger ability to organize labor. Along a water channel that researchers nicknamed the Valley of Sacrifices, they built stone-covered mounds containing cattle remains. One chamber was lined with clay and roofed with wood. Inside lay an entire young cow, carefully placed on its side. Think about that. In a place where cattle meant survival, someone gave up a whole animal and buried it. That is not disposal. That is belief with a price tag. The location mattered too. The channel carried rainwater into the basin. If people wanted to honor their dead, protect their herds, ask for rain, or bind different families through a shared ceremony, this was the obvious place to do it. Water arrived here. So did everyone's future. And near the end of that channel, on a low, sandy rise, they built the circle. It was not enormous. Nabta's circle measured only about 4 meters across. You could fit it inside a modern living room. Assuming your living room allowed prehistoric ritual architecture and your landlord was unusually relaxed. Thin sandstone slabs formed the outer ring. Several pairs created narrow sight lines. 6 more stones stood near the center in 2 rows. A hearth beside the circle produced a date of roughly 4,800 years before the Common Era. That makes it about 2,000 years older than the main stone monument at Stonehenge. And one of its clearest sight lines pointed towards sunrise near the summer solstice, the longest day of the year. That sunrise arrived close to the beginning of the rainy season. There it is. The circle may have worked as a seasonal marker. Stand in the right place, watch the sun rise between selected stones, and you know the solar year has reached its turning point. The rains may come soon. The basin may fill. The grass may return. It may be time for scattered groups to bring their herds back to Nabta. It was not predicting whether rain would fall on Thursday. It was telling you when hope became reasonable. But here's the thing. Calling Nabta Playa a calendar does not fully explain it. The gaps between its stones were too broad for precise day-by-day measurement. The 6 central slabs have no agreed astronomical purpose. Some researchers have proposed connections to major stars, while others warn that the evidence is not strong enough to turn every stone into a cosmic diagram. And honestly, the builders did not need an observatory in the modern sense. They needed a place where sky knowledge, survival, memory, and ceremony became one thing. Here is what makes this so important. The circle did not merely tell people when a season was changing. It may have told people when to become a society. Most of the year, herding families had good reasons to stay apart. Too many cattle in one area would destroy the grass and drain the water. But at certain moments, groups could gather near the basin. They could exchange news, arrange marriages, settle arguments, trade tools, honor ancestors, sacrifice cattle, and renew alliances. The stones gave that gathering a fixed center. You might travel across a nearly featureless landscape for weeks, but Nabta remained Nabta. The circle did not migrate. The graves did not migrate. The stories attached to them stayed in place. For mobile people, that permanence was powerful. It said, we return here. And once a community agrees that a place is sacred, somebody must remember the route. Somebody must know the sky. Somebody must decide when the ceremony begins. Somebody must organize the labor and persuade everyone that moving stones under a desert sun is an excellent use of calories. That creates authority. Not necessarily kings. Not necessarily priests in fancy hats. Archaeologists have not found palaces or mountains of treasure showing a ruling class at Nabta. But the site reveals coordination on a scale much larger than a single household. Complex society was appearing without a city. After the small circle, Nabta became even stranger. Between roughly 4,500 and 3,600 years before the Common Era, builders quarried larger sandstone blocks and arranged them across the basin. Some formed long alignments. Others stood around oval structures. At one complex, people dug through more than 2 meters of sediment to reach a naturally buried slab of hard sandstone, shaped its surface, refilled the pit, and placed another stone weighing several tons above it. Why? We still do not know. Some upright stones may have represented people. One large-shaped rock even resembles a cow. Repeated orientations toward north, along with possible alignments to bright stars, suggest that the builders connected the landscape not only to rain and the sun, but also to death and the night sky. The practical calendar had become a sacred map. This is where people sometimes sprint directly into fantasy. You will hear that Nabta was a perfect star computer, a map of the galaxy, or proof of secret knowledge handed down by someone suspiciously unavailable for questions. The real story is better. These were observant people living in a difficult environment. They watched the sky because mistakes were expensive. They stored knowledge in stone because human memory dies with the person carrying it. And they wrapped that knowledge in ritual because facts become much harder to forget when your entire community performs them. That combination, observation, monument, ceremony, repetition, is one of civilization's most effective inventions. You still use it. Your year is filled with fixed dates, public monuments, religious holidays, national ceremonies, birthdays, and annual gatherings. Some are practical, some are symbolic. Most are both. Nabta was doing an early version of that before Egypt had pharaohs. Then the climate tightened its grip. The monsoon rains retreated south. Dry periods became longer. Seasonal lakes failed more often. By around 3,400 years before the Common Era, maintaining life at Nabta was no longer realistic. The herders abandoned the basin and moved toward more dependable water, including the Nile Valley. They did not necessarily march east one afternoon and invent Egypt before dinner. History is never that tidy. We cannot draw a straight line from Nabta's circle to the pyramids. But people carried ideas. They carried knowledge of cattle, seasons, stars, stonework, ceremony, and large-scale cooperation. In the Nile Valley, communities were also becoming more settled and more connected. Within centuries, villages expanded, regional powers emerged, and the civilization of ancient Egypt began taking shape. Nabta Playa shows that part of this social complexity was already developing out in the desert. Long before a pharaoh aligned a temple or ordered thousands of workers to raise a monument, Saharan herders had already learned the basic trick. Make the sky meaningful. Make a place permanent. Give people a reason to return. So here's the full picture. First, summer rains created temporary lakes in a greener Sahara. Then small groups learned when to enter the desert and when to leave. They dug wells, stored wild plants, and built a life around cattle. As drought raised the stakes, they gathered at Nabta, buried precious animals, and turned water into something sacred. Around 4,800 years before the Common Era, they placed a ring of stones toward the solstice sunrise. Part seasonal signal, part ceremonial stage, part promise that scattered people would meet again. Later, they raised larger monuments linking cattle, ancestors, earth, sun, and stars. And when the desert finally won, they carried that accumulated knowledge toward the Nile. So the next time you check the weather before leaving home, remember what that tiny forecast is replacing. Once, people watched a sunrise through a gap in sandstone and used it to decide when water, grass, animals, relatives, ceremonies, and opportunity might return. The stones did not control the rain. They controlled what humans did while waiting for it. And that may be the most human invention of all. When the world refuses to be predictable, we build something that helps us face it together. If ancient mysteries like this are your kind of thing, there are plenty more waiting in the sand.